very happy that almost all participants made it to Stuttgart, but there are a few exceptions, and one reached us from New York City. It comes from Peter Eisenman, who probably doesn't need an introduction. He's the principal of Peter Eisenman Architects in New York City. He has developed a very unique body of work that always centers around ideas of modern architecture for almost 6 decades, and he sent us a video on the notion of form.
I want to thank the organizers of this symposium for inviting me, and I'm sorry I can't be with you in person in Stuttgart, but I'm very much interested in the topics and especially the notion of form, which I have transformed from that title to a 2-word title, Alberti's Form. So with that, I'll begin. Before 1400, the architectural world was not dialectical. A rose window, as you see in Gothic cathedral facade of Leon, was a rose window, not the sign of one. With Brunelleschi's introduction of perspective around 1415, architecture then became dialectical. Now, building object and a seeing subject produce actual space and conceptual space. Now there was a need for both real things and signs of real things. Enter Alberti. His De Re Edificatoria of 1485, published 13 years after his death, was like Vitruvius's 10 books, but a very different 10 books. Alberti was a scholar, Vitruvius an engineer. Before Brunelleschi, space was not a conceptual term. Alberti attempted to theorize space, following from Brunelleschi. Alberti's most important term in the 10 books was the Latin consinitas. It was a dialectical term, translated into English as harmony, not only between parts, but more importantly from part to whole. To this day, what we take away from Alberti's 10 books is the idea of a harmony of parts and a part-to-whole relationship. However, if we look at Alberti's built work, we see another Alberti, one who at every turn questioned the idea of spatial and temporal harmony. Beginning with Santa Maria Novella, 1456, in a unique facade design for the time, there was a giant order and S-shaped scrolls. There was a circular glass window and a pediment replacing the rose window, and the pediment was actually medieval, while the frieze was antique. The S-shaped scrolls was an attempt to relate a wide ground floor with a narrow upper floor. Thus, the facade was partly historical and functional, and partly a new invention, hardly a harmony. The second facade I want to look at of Alberti's is San Andrea of Mantua of 1472. He replaces the ocular facade window with a giant barrel vault arch. This is one of 2 overlays that make up the major facade. Alberti, who was replying to his client Ludovico Gonzaga, who wanted something new, produced a hybrid of a Roman triumphal arch and a Greek vernacular temple front. The fourth one that we should look at is San Sebastiano of 1460, also in Mantua. This presents a dialectic between column and wall. The crypt, which is entered at grade, is clearly overstructured with a field of columns, while the first floor, which contains the nave, is noticeable for the absence of columns. One clear space, unlike most other churches, which have some intercolumnation. Even the Roman wall churches had evidence of columns. The fifth building of Alberti's that we should examine is the Palazzo Rucellai of 1456. It is also a play between column and wall. It presents 2 structural systems simultaneously, a trebiated column grid system and a wall bearing system. It is the first example of a redundant system producing what we could call architectural signs. If the trebiated system is acting at 100%, what was the wall bearing system doing? It was acting as a sign and vice versa. Hence the beginning of the idea of building systems and components as signs. Finally, it is the Tempio Malatestiana of 1450, which puts a lie to the Albertian mantra of apart to whole harmony. Here, in a shell of an earlier Gothic church of the late 12th century vintage, Alberti purposely uses the rebuilding of several Gothic nave columns to stand in clear opposition to the more classical wrapper, whose module created a purposeful challenge to the form of the Gothic columnar nave. The result is an incomplete whole made up of two discordant parts that reminds one of the Derridian idea of the supplement, which when added to an incomplete original fails to further complete. Here, the dialectical synthesis produces nothing but two incomplete fragments. One speculation that can be drawn from a study of Alberti's buildings, as opposed to his voluminous text, is that the harmony proposed by Consinitas leads us to an entirely other world where the supposedly ideality of the antique becomes a fiction unhelpful to today's unstable discipline. Thank you very much.